All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and we are so excited to continue our epic series with the Toronto Zoo. So over the last 2 months, we have done, I think, 20 programs with them, featuring every kind of animal imaginable, shared some really amazing stories. Last Tuesday, or this Tuesday, it was Animal Sounds, one of our most popular broadcasts ever, so I encourage you to check that out on YouTube as well. But today's presentation is really special and really unique. So today we are going to learn about the 7 grandfather teachings of the Anishinaabe people. Taylor is joining us as a new speaker from the Toronto Zoo. We're really well versed in this, and we're going to dive in a really unique presentation today. I am so excited personally. Before we get underway, a few quick housekeeping notes. A huge hi to Ms. Baker's class joining us in Oshawa. Really appreciate you joining us for our first ever Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants program live on screen. So welcome to you. For everyone on YouTube, just let me know where you're joining from in the world. I love to see where we get an audience from, and you can share questions right in the chat bar. We also do have a Slido, so there's not going to be polls or quizzes today, but you can share your questions in Slido for those of you who are familiar with it. So the event code is teaching, just the regular word teaching. I'll put that in the chat bar as well. All right, let's dive in. I'm so excited to get started. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us, and looking very forward to this. Take it away.
Ani Bozo. Aqui na Wanda na Indigenous Amik Nindodem Wasaksing in Donjaba. So I'm going to just translate what I said. So hello everybody, my name is Taylor Kababano, and I'm from Wasaksing First Nation. I'm also a member of the Beaver Clan. And here at the Toronto Zoo, I'm a First Nation conservation steward, and I'm also the head of the Turtle Island Conservation Program. And today I'm here to talk to you about the 7 grandfather teachings of the Anishinaabe people, and how some of the animals here on site can help us to learn and better understand these teachings. And so the 7 grandfather teachings really encompass the values, the morals, and the structures of Anishinaabe society. And the Anishinaabe people have a story that speaks to the origin of these teachings. So I'm going to start with that story. And so long ago, there was the 7 grandfathers, and they decided that they would send a messenger down to the land to see how the Anishinaabe people were living. And this messenger seen that the Anishinaabe people were living in a very negative way. And so this messenger found that the Anishinaabe people felt cheated and lied to, and the decisions weren't being made with the best intentions. And this messenger found a child, a young baby, and he brought that child back to the 7 grandfathers. And it was decided that this child would learn how to live a good life. And this child was taught in the teachings of humility, honesty, wisdom, truth, respect, love, and bravery. And these are our 7 grandfather teachings. And when this child was asked to return to the land to share these teachings from the Anishinaabe people, he was told that these teachings are not one or the other. You cannot have love without respect or truth without honesty. You must practice all 7 together. And so here today, we're going to talk about these 7 teachings. And I'm going to speak to each animal that's affiliated with them and speak to why that animal is affiliated with them. So for the rest of the presentation, we're going to go through these teachings. And so we're going to start today with our first one, which is honesty. Honesty is represented by the Sabe. And the Sabe is believed to be a giant, kind of like Bigfoot creature. And the story goes that long ago, Keech Sabe lived amongst the Anishinaabe people. And he lived amongst the people to remind them that there's always someone, a bigger authority that you have to speak to, be honest to, and always to live true to yourself. Our next teacher we're going to move on to is our turtle. Turtles, teaching represented by turtles is truth. And why turtles represent truth is because they are one of the oldest creatures. And it is believed that they were witness to the creation of life and of land. And it's actually, turtles are a focal point of the Haudenosaunee creation story, a story which I will be sharing next month during a Facebook Live turtle release session. Here at the Toronto Zoo, we raise Blandings turtles and release them every year on June 21st, which is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And it also happens to be the longest day of the year, the summer solstice. Last week, I did a video and provided a little segment on the back of a turtle shell, and how there's a secret little calendar on that shell called the 13 Moons calendar, and how Indigenous people use that calendar in resource harvesting and resource production. So if you're interested in that video, or you want to see any past or future videos, check out our YouTube channel for any of those videos. So if you were paying attention, earlier in the presentation, I introduced myself using an Ojibwe phrase, Amik Nindodem, which means I am of the Beaver Clan. Anishinaabe people, just like everybody else, when we're born, we're given names. by our elders and our grandparents. Sorry, by our elders and our parents. But our families also belong to groups called clans, which assign a very traditional role within our societies and are affiliated with an animal, just like the seven grandfather teachings. For Beaver Clan, members of that clan are seen as physical, spiritual, and emotional builders within the community. Within the seven grandfather teachings, the beaver represents wisdom, because the beaver is able to utilize the gifts of nature in a positive way. It is believed that the beaver, with its big, strong front teeth and its knowledge of building, is able to create a sustainable world. However, there is a catch with this teaching. When a beaver creates dams to flood areas for new life, it also pushes out the life that was there before, always making us think that there are consequences for every action that we take. The next teaching we're going to speak of is humility. And humility is represented by the wolf. The wolf is a very giving creature and very devoted to its pack. They live selflessly, not selfishly. And actually, if you get a chance while you're here at the zoo visiting our scenic drive, you might get a chance to spot some of our Arctic wolf pups and their parents playing around. So if you are lucky enough to see them, try to think of this teaching of humility of someone, a creature that lives for its group and not just for itself. The next teaching we're going to speak to is a teaching of respect, and that is best represented by the bison. One single bison can sustain a family in terms of clothing, food, and shelter for weeks on end. In pre-colonial times, Indigenous people, not just Anishinaabe people, but Indigenous people across Turtle Island, engaged in a hunter-gatherer dynamic with bison. This dynamic, through this relationship, you can really learn the spirit of this teaching of respect. When an animal gives its life for our own sustenance, we have to remember to say thank you and to reflect on our privilege. So when I was a child, I was taught by my grandparents that when you take a medicine from the land, or you take a fish from the water, you must give tobacco to say thank you. Our final teaching is that of bravery, and is best represented, of course, by the bear. Now, the bear is another clan animal, just like some of the other animals we've talked about during this presentation. So if you can remember any of those animals, head about the chat bar and we'll try to give you a shout out on that. Bears are extremely courageous and very strong animals, and they overcome most of their natural challenges. Bears are also very devoted family members. And so a great example of this is a female bear will regularly stand up to a larger and stronger male bear to protect her cubs. We also can learn from bears hibernating that we must take time in our lives for rest and rejuvenation. Bears teach us that there's a balance between time to rest and time to be assertive and courageous. Now, here at the Toronto Zoo, we have to be a little careful when we talk about bears, because unlike their southern cousins, black and brown bears, polar bears actually do not hibernate. The females do retreat into dens when they are pregnant in the winter months. And so, with all of that, I want to say thank you, and that is our little spiel of the seven grandfather teachings. Now, for all our viewers that are listening today, I want to give a little quiz. So in the chat bar, I want to see if any of our viewers can list out all seven of the grandfather teachings. So before I open it up to any questions, I just want to also plug a few upcoming presentations up for the Toronto Zoo. So on June 20th, which is a Saturday, I will be hosting a Facebook Live crafting demonstration in celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Day. So we'll be making talking sticks and medicine mix. And then on June 23rd, which is the following Tuesday, we'll be hosting a Facebook Live turtle release session where I will also be sharing a traditional story. So make sure to tune in for both of those presentations. And make sure to also check out the Toronto Zoo's Facebook page for links to those events. So if you have any questions, I'd like to open the floor up now, and I'd like to say Chimi Witch for listening to my little spiel of the seven grandfather teachings.
Fantastic. Taylor, thank you so much for such a, again, fantastic, unique presentation. We've never had anything quite like that. That was beautiful. Again, in the chat bar on YouTube, if you can remember all the seven grandfather teachings, do type that in. We'd love to see you guys get all that there. And we'll be taking questions. So in YouTube, let me know where you're joining from. Share as many questions as you can, and we'll dive in a minute. Slido as well. Lots of opportunities to share everything you're fascinated with. And let's dive in with Sebastian and Ms. Baker's class, who has our first question for us today. So Sebastian, you might need to demute your own mic, Sebastian, and then come on up.
Okay, actually, I have a different question. Can I go to the washroom?
Yes, you can, man. Go for it. No problem. So I'm curious, Taylor, as a first kickoff question, how long did it take to learn all these things? I mean, you're sharing them with us today, but for your own childhood, for your own youth, how long does it take to sort of put these stories to heart and really sort of, act upon them or think of them in a sort of light?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you, Jesse. And it's different for every individual. For myself, these are teachings that we were raised with throughout our entire life. They're taught in schools. They're taught they're taught in childhood. My grandmother and my uncle and my father are really the people who exposed me to this when I was a child. But I didn't really formally start learning many of these stories until I was a lot later in my life. So I was about 18, 19 years old in university. And I was really coming to terms with who I was and what indigeneity meant to me and what my Indigenous background meant to me. And it was a really big journey, a really eye-opening journey, and it really made me come to terms with who I am. And it really was a really big turning point in my life. And so these stories are beautiful, and they've really opened my eyes to our connection with our natural environment. And I'm just very, very, very fortunate to be able to share these stories with viewers like through platforms like this.
Fantastic. Well, hey, over 120 people tuning in, plus 20 live. So we are reaching a ton of kids across Ontario and beyond. So we really appreciate you doing that with us today. Andreas, by the way, on YouTube, nailed your 7 teachings. Andreas always joins in on our Toronto Zoo session and got all 7 teachings like off the bat. Way to go, Andreas. Someone's paying attention. Nicole, or Miss Kaufman, wanted to know, so she's a teacher joining us on YouTube. She wanted to know, for you or just in general, how can these teachings be passed on in our daily lives? Like, how can we incorporate this? How do you incorporate this, if that's a personal question you want to take it that way?
Yes, for sure. So as I mentioned, in that little story I mentioned of the origin of the teachings, that we can't just use one of the teachings in our life. Right? We can't just accept the teaching of love without accepting the teaching of wisdom. And so this is really just the approach that I take to practicing these in my life is just the approach of being true to myself, and being true to what I think are my morals and my beliefs and my values. These teachings are very general and very broad. And so if you think of when we were walking with our grandparents in the parks if we were children, or any guardian that we had, walking just in childhood in general, and learning what was right and what was wrong. That's really what these principles, these teachings are. It's just really a foundation of what is right and what is wrong, and how to live your life to the best for the people around you. There really is no right or wrong way to practice this. It really is a personal and individual approach. The best I can say is to read the teachings and interpret them how you feel best, and to just try to live a life that is as true to your heart as possible.
Nice. Thanks, Taylor. All right, I'm going to go to Ms. Baker herself. Ms. Baker, if you want to share a question on behalf of your class, go for it. And again, for your students, if they want to let me know in the chat bar they have a question, they can do that as well. But just demute your mic, because it doesn't like me today, and go for it.
I don't know whether I missed it or not, but I was just curious about love. Why the eagle or love?
Yes, no problem. I tend to speak a little quick sometimes, so my apologies. The belief is that the eagle is the animal that soars the highest in the sky. And so because the eagle is soaring the highest in the sky, it shares the closest connection with our Creator. It is believed that when you're holding an eagle feather, you can feel the bond and the love of that connection. And so that's why eagle feathers are used in most of our ceremonies. Eagles in Anishinaabe culture, not just Anishinaabe culture, in Haudenosaunee culture, and a lot of Indigenous cultures in Michigan, North America, revere and very much love eagles. So they're just because of that high soaring connection.
Yeah, nice. All right, Genevieve and Oshawa, Genevieve, Juliet, welcome back to you two as well. Really nice to have you in. Genevieve wants to know, what is the territory of the Anishinaabe? So where their peoples have been, in the past or currently in the present?
The territory can be a little ambiguous, and that is a political question at times as well. But just to give a geographic region, northeastern United States and southeastern Canada, so like the New England area, New York State, Wisconsin, all of Ontario, parts of Quebec are very much Anishinaabe culture, Anishinaabe territory. I will say though that there are pockets of individual nations throughout these regions. So it's not just like saying that Canada is where all the Canadians are. There's pockets of different nations scattered throughout North America.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Miss Coffin wanted to know, how are your stories passed down to each generation? In the oral tradition, do the stories change over time, or do they remain the same for hundreds, if not thousands of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, the stories I have were passed to me through oral tradition. But here at the zoo, part of my turtle outing conservation program is to archive these stories in physical media and to share them with Indigenous communities to make sure that if we do happen with the way our world is globalizing to lose that oral tradition, that we can still maintain that knowledge. In terms of accessing these stories and that's all. Yeah.
Well, it's all good. Perfect. Speaking of accessing the stories, we have a whole bunch of people on YouTube that are really keen to see the animals again. They really want to ingrain this in their mind. So if we could take the camera back and see those 7 animals and stories again, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll go in order. So this was number 1, honesty is the Sabe. Number 2 was truth, represented by the turtle. Number 3 is love, represented by the eagle. Number 4 was wisdom, represented by the beaver. Number 5 was humility, represented by the wolf. Number 6 was respect, represented by the bison. And number 7 was courage, or sometimes seen as bravery, represented by the bear. And now just to follow up on one of the questions that was just asked me, these animals do vary from region to region. And so I don't want to say that every story is specific to every region. Different nations have different species compositions within their natural environments. And so these can change. So for example, honesty is represented by the Sabe. In some regions, it's represented by the raven instead. So it really does depend on the natural environment and the ecological makeup of those environments.
This is so neat. I'm I'm enjoying this more than the kids are. One of the questions we have from Sophia is, were there always 7? Now, 7's a number that seems to be very poignant to a lot of cultures around the world. Are there cultures within different Native communities where there are 8 or 10 or fewer, or is 7 a really set number?
Yeah, it's always 7. There's a number of reasons for that, but the reason that comes to mind, I think the easiest way to explain this concept is in terms of our thinking. I was taught that when we go to pick a plant, for example, we want to think 7 generations forward and 7 generations backwards when we make those decisions. So not just picking a plant, it can be any decision we make in our lives. We don't just want to make a decision that's going to impact us. We want to think 7, like I said, 7 generations forward and 7 generations backwards. And that 7 generations is really where this teaching is founded from. Yeah.
A lot of modern civilization could use a perspective that 7 generations forward. That's something we should incorporate into all our presentations on conservation. All right, before we go to some more YouTube and Slido questions, Miss Baker, you had a great question you typed into me, so I'd like to have you share that. It's more fun to say it in person. Just come on up and demute your mic and you're good to go.
We have been talking about primary sources and secondary sources when you're talking about history. And I was just curious, is the oral tradition of stories, is that considered a primary source of information, or is that a secondary source?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. And it really depends on where that's come from. If it's some talk at the water cooler between 2 coworkers, that might not qualify as a primary source. But if it is an elder who we can verify as archive this information, as we can verify to some sort of extent on their end that this has been passed down through an elder and they've been kind of traditionally trained within their community, then yes, to us that is a primary source and we will take that as a primary source. When we are publishing our resources here at the zoo, that is how we approach our publications. So we will meet with elders. We will confirm that their story is, we won't confirm, I won't say accuracy. I will say we will confirm their stories with a number of different communities in the region. So usually we'll meet with one elder from one community, go to another region and meet with that elder. And if those stories differ, we might just follow up with them and ask why, and then speak to those differences.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Taylor. All right, Santino in Mr. Ricardo's class wanted to know, how long have these teachings been around? I mean, one thing with documenting stuff and having things in writing is that we have a very good sense of when a story came to pass. In the oral tradition, do we have a sense of when these stories began, date-wise?
The date-wise is going to be very difficult to pinpoint.
Yeah.
The idea behind the oral tradition is that, unfortunately, it's very difficult to pinpoint when these stories, or sorry, these teachings would have first come to fruition, I want to say. The idea behind them is that they've existed from time immemorial. So these are teachings of the land, and they've existed with the land, and we never created them. We just discovered them.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Juliet in Oshawa wants to know what other animals are important to the Anishinaabe people or in general to Indigenous communities across Canada?
That's a great question. I'm going to say every single animal is important to Indigenous people across Canada. So every animal that you can see in our natural environment is important to us. It has a role and it plays a part in our ecosystem. But I don't just want to say that it's only the animals here in Canada. There are people Indigenous to every region of our planet. I, being Anishinaabe, am Indigenous here to Ontario. But there are people Indigenous to all regions of our planet, and those animals in those regions are important to those Indigenous people. So I will be very confident in saying that every animal is important to all Indigenous people on this planet.
Nice. All right, one of the questions we're getting from a lot of people online is why grandfather teachings? If you could highlight that again, why specifically they're called grandfather teachings or grandfather animals, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, without getting too much into the teachings, in our culture, there's a divide between where we're allowed to teach and where we're allowed to share. As an academic, as a scholar, I can share the knowledge that I have, but I can't teach the knowledge that, I can't teach it as a course, sort of say. So I can say that the 7 grandfather teachings, the idea is that we have these things called grandfather stones. And it's the idea that a grandfather is someone or an elder in our community is someone who holds a lot of knowledge and has a lot of experience. And the concept is that that experience, that knowledge is passed through our community and down to our youth. And so actually right now in our communities, we're having a very big issue with this. So there's a large elder youth disconnect. And so we want to, through presentations like this and through active programs that we have here at the zoo, try to bring our elders and our youth together to maintain this oral tradition or this continuation of knowledge.
Sorry, muted myself. I know what I'm doing. Speaking of this knowledge that you share through the zoo, I mean, we're doing this presentation with you today, and it's really special. What kind of programs typically happen in the zoo? When you guys open up again, can people come and do programs like this with you and learn these sort of stories and beyond?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. So this is actually like a little bit of a test pilot for a larger program we have here at the zoo. Through our learning and engagement department, you can take a standardized tour for about an hour and a half here at the zoo, either in the morning or the afternoon. This tour fits right in with that schedule, and so you can come in as a class once the zoo is open, of course, and our health restrictions are back in place. You'll be able to come in, spend an hour and a half with myself or one of our Turtle Island Conservation members or learning engagement staff members, and they'll lead you through our America's Pavilion and Tundra Track domain so that you can learn how these teachings in greater depth match those animals. There'll also be a chance to conduct some ceremonies as well with some of those leaders.
Beautiful. Well, I can't wait to do that personally when you guys open up again, and what a neat opportunity. All right, I'm going to go back to Ms. Baker herself. Some of the students are typing in questions as well, but they're on a similar theme, and I think we're going to wrap up the broadcast and highlighting all those together. But Ms. Baker, if you have a question specifically, come on up, follow your video.
Thank you. Another question, just about why are they called grandfather teachings? I thought the Anishinaabe were a matriarchal society, so that the grandmothers would have been more important than the grandfathers. Or am I mistaken in that?
Well, I want to first say that my mother and my sister would very much appreciate you reminding everybody we are a matriarchal society. And yes, that is true. And at my house, my mother is definitely the boss. The idea behind grandfather teaching really is that it's less about the gender and more about the time of your life. It's more to say that an elder or grandfather or grandmother is someone who has a lot of experience and holds a lot of these teachings. It's to say that someone who's young, someone like myself, doesn't have all the answers and never will. But it's to say that I should know enough to go to my elders and to be able to seek greater experience and sort of greater wisdom. The idea behind grandfathers, without getting too much into the teachings, is when we have our sacred fires, we have these we have stones that we put into these fires. We call them grandfathers because of the history and the knowledge that they hold. But yeah, that's as far as I'll go with that.
Yeah. Sacred fire sounds like the coolest thing in the whole world. Yeah. What a beautiful culture. All right. I want to go to Charlotte in Ms. Baker's class, who has a question for us. Charlotte, just demute your microphone if you can. It's, again, not letting me do that today, and you're good to go.
What are the animals, and why are the animals and words of faith on turtle shells?
Yeah.
Oh. So the animals again, I can list them out for you again. Is sabe, turtle, the eagle, the beaver, our wolf. Sorry, I'm reading the teaching. The bison and the bear. And so they're actually cast on the back of turtle shells because this was actually an art donation by a public school class in Oshawa, Ontario. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Specifically why they're on the back of a turtle shell, though, is actually something I'm going to have to make you wait for that answer. So if you tune in next month on our Facebook Live session, I'm going to share a story that will go a lot more into depth to why these are represented on turtle shell. But I'll give you a little hint. It has to do with a word called Mashiki Minsu. It's an Ojibwe word. So if you tune in next month, you'll figure out what that means.
What a tease, Tanner. Come on. Well, we encourage you guys to do that. And that's something we'll highlight at the end, is how you can find out more about the zoo and where to find their programs online. But I encourage our students to do that. That would be awesome. All right. I love this question from Sophia. She just recently turned 10. She joins in all our broadcasts. And so this might be a personal opinion question, Tanner, but which animal shows their meaning the most? So is it love and eagles, wisdom and beavers? What really jumps out to you?
For me, I'm making no dem. As someone who is part of the beaver clan, to me, I'm going to choose beaver almost every single time. But I would definitely say that all of these animals represent these teachings equally. Even ourselves, humans have their own teachings as well that we can share. And so I wouldn't say that one of these is better than the other. It's that we're all part of one big family. We're one part of one ecosystem, and only together can we thrive.
Nice. Well, this is a nice segue off that answer. Natasha wants to know, are the animals connected in some way? So you can take this as you want, like as a group. I know we've highlighted, how important animals in general are to the Anishinaabe people, to Indigenous communities across Canada, across the board. But do certain of the animals connect with each other in certain ways? Do they all? I don't know how you want to interpret that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. As a scientist, as someone who's studied natural environments, specifically plants, we know that trees, for example, are able to communicate in certain ways using some pheromones and hormones. There are other animals as well, such as some birds. There are mammal species as well, such as some elephants that can communicate in odd ways, in different ways. So I do want to say that they are connected, and I do want to say that there is an understanding. Spiritually speaking, we are all connected, and that is from when you see a turtle, for example. We work with a lot of turtles in my line of work. Unfortunately, a fatality on the road, it's been run over. You can feel in your heart the impact of that loss of life. And so I want to say that even though we might be different species, we are all similar life. So we are all connected in some way, shape, or form. And there's no better place that hits that message home than here at the zoo, where we are constantly immersed with different forms of life, and we all get along pretty well here.
Nice, Taylor. This leads into a personal question, one that I nearly want to wrap up the broadcast with, which is this idea that you're steeped in this tradition, this history of Indigenous culture. And so we talk about different ways of knowing and different ways of thinking a lot, in contrasting Western science and Indigenous knowledge. And so did that background that you had as a child, as an individual, seep into and sort of change your understanding that you gained through science and becoming a biologist?
Yeah, it has in multiple ways. I actually like to say, I have a little phrase I throw out when I give little presentations to people, is that I do conservation through culture. So instead of working directly to conserve someone's lands, I conserve their lands through conserving their culture. So it's a very interesting approach to conservation. But to answer more on your question broadly, to me, when I was becoming a scientist, when I was training, sitting in front of computers in these laboratories, it was always kind of mind-boggling that we're studying these natural environments in a very unnatural environment. And as someone who, I grew up here in Toronto, but I also spent a very significant amount of my time in my First Nation community. And when I was in that community, immersed in our forest, on the water, fishing with my father, picking medicines in our fields, it really hit home the impact of these ecosystems and how we could study them, how we could observe an animal's behavior in its natural setting and make come to better conclusions than if we were to kind of observe it in the captive setting. And so it was a really interesting dichotomy for me to grow with. And I really do think it's offered me two different perspectives in life. And I think that's why I naturally found myself here at the zoo, is that it allows this place allows me to bring both of those worlds into one.
Yeah. Outstanding. This is so much fun. I'm having such a good time. Well, we are getting near the end of the broadcast, so I want to wrap up with a really nice question before we dive into where people can find more in the zoo and, find out that spoiler later on of turtle teachings and more on Facebook Live. But someone on Slido wanted to know, is there anywhere we can go to hear more stories of the Anishinaabe or First Nations across Canada? Anywhere you'd recommend that does it in a really meaningful, thoughtful way?
Yeah, for sure. You can actually go right onto our website. So from the resource link I sent in, you can go under that link, and there's some PDF storybooks that we published through our Turtle Island Conservation Program. And then there are a number of stories that you can read through, not just the ones that I've shared here today. There will be more stories that I'll be sharing next month as well. And if there is more interest in stories as well, people can reach out directly to me, and I have some contacts with the traditional knowledge circles and holders of Ontario, and I can share some resources with people.
Outstanding. So we'll encourage that. Anyone who wants to email us, and all the teachers that we work with will have our email, exploring by the seat of your pants. Please get in touch if you'd like to talk to Taylor with more questions. We'd be happy to share some more. I'm going to link in the Turtle Island Conservation link at the very least into the YouTube chat bar right now. So I encourage you to check that out and dive in with some stories. And just to plug, because we worked with them before, the Canadian Geographic team created something called the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada, which was a multi-year major project over the last decade, I think. And so there's some really great resources to learn more there as well. Taylor, before we wrap up, where can people go to find these Facebook Live presentations? Find out what you guys are doing at the zoo as you guys are closed to the public. Anything you can share?
Yeah, for sure. So you can, if you want to find any of these upcoming presentations, you can go to our Toronto Zoo Facebook page. You can go to our website as well. And you can go to our Toronto Zoo YouTube channel as well.
Nice. All
Okay.
right.
If you'd like to know, if you'd like any more specific information about this presentation or any of the presentations on wetlands or turtles, you can reach out directly to me as well, and I can share that information.
Outstanding. Well, Taylor, thank you so much again for such a unique presentation. We really, really appreciate you being here. And I know it's your first time doing a full one with us. So how we always end these broadcasts, I'm going to demute everyone's microphones. So Ms. Baker, everyone in Ms. Baker's class, if you guys could join me in saying a huge thank you to Taylor for joining us today. I'm trying to demute you all as fast as possible, but go for it. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Baker's group, we'll see you guys again soon. I'll pass along those links as soon as we're done in an email. And Taylor, thanks so much again. All right.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
the opportunity, Jesse. Bum up.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Bye for now, guys.
Thank you,
See soon.
Jesse. Thank you, grade 5.